Blood of Legacy. The bar was a dim, smoky cathedral of despair, its stained wooden counter a silent witness to the unraveling of countless lives, including his own. Leonard Gray, a man whose middle years had crept up on him like a thief in the night, sat hunched over his usual stool, the one closest to the flickering neon sign that buzzed "Exit" above the door. The irony wasn't lost on him, though he rarely acknowledged it aloud. Night after night he drowned himself in amber waves of whiskey, the sharp burn a fleeting distraction from the hollow ache that gnawed at his core. The bartender, a grizzled man named Hank, with a face like old leather, knew better than to cut him off before closing time. Leonard was a fixture here, as permanent as the peeling paint on the walls or the jukebox that crooned the same tired country tunes. He had no one waiting for him, no reason to stumble home before the clock struck 2. His wife, Madge, had long since fled, taking with her the last vestiges of a life that might have been. The divorce papers still sat in a drawer somewhere, yellowing with age, a testament to his failure to hold on to even the scraps of stability she'd offered. His job at the hardware store had evaporated years ago, replaced by the indifferent hum of a world that didn't need him. But Leonard wasn't entirely adrift. His parents, those towering figures of perfection who'd loomed over his life like judgmental gods, had left him something tangible in their passing. A handful of rental properties, including the old family home. The checks came sporadically, enough to keep the lights on and the liquor flowing. He hated his life with a ferocity that simmered just beneath his sallow skin. The alcohol didn't just numb the pain, it whispered truths he couldn't escape. It told him his misery wasn't his fault, it was theirs. His parents, Richard and Evelyn Gray, had planted the seeds of his ruin long before he'd had a chance to prove them wrong. Ivy League graduates, they'd worn their pedigrees like crowns, their lives a glittering tapestry of achievement and charm. Richard had been a broad-shouldered jock, a man whose college football trophies lined the mantel of the house. Evelyn, with her porcelain beauty and effortless grace, had flitted through social circles like a butterfly, leaving admirers in her wake. And then there was Leonard, their only child, their great disappointment. He could still hear the echoes of their voices, sharp and cutting, slicing through the haze of his childhood memories. "Why can't you be more like us?" they'd ask, their tones dripping with exasperation. He'd tried, God knows he had. He'd enrolled in community college, hoping to claw his way toward something resembling their approval. But the words on the pages blurred together, and the numbers refused to add up. He dropped out after a year, his dreams of academia crumbling like ash in his hands. They never let him forget it. When their friends came over, those polished, successful couples with their own tales of triumph, they'd introduce him with a hesitation so subtle it was almost imperceptible, then a slight pause before the inevitable lie. "Leonard's doing wonderfully, working on some big project," they'd say, their smiles tight, their eyes averted. He knew they were ashamed of him. He saw it in the way they'd steer conversations away from him, the way they'd laugh a little too loudly at their own jokes to fill the silence he left behind. He had no hobbies to boast of, no passions to ignite a spark in his dull brown eyes. He wasn't athletic like his father, nor was he charming like his mother, who could coax a smile from a stone. Leonard was just there, a shadow in their radiant lives, a blemish they couldn't erase. and they never let him forget how different he was. "When we were your age," his father would say, leaning back in his chair with a glass of Scotch in hand, "we were the life of every party. We had friends, ambitions, lives worth living." His mother would nod, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the table. "You're always here, Leonard. Don't you have anywhere else to be?" The question wasn't curiosity, it was accusation. He had nowhere else to be, no one else to be. To make matters worse, he was plain, unremarkable in every way. His chin was weak, a fact that his mother had pointed out with clinical precision one afternoon when he was 16. "You'll never turn heads, dear," she'd said, her tone almost pitying. His father had chimed in, chuckling. "And clumsy, too, tripping over your own feet like a newborn colt." They'd laughed together, a private symphony of mockery, while Leonard shrank into himself. Years later, when it became clear he'd never amount to much, his father delivered the final blow. "Well, the world needs ditch diggers too, son." The words had lodged in his chest like shrapnel, festering with every passing year. But the worst of it, the wound that bled anew each night at the bar, was their little inside joke. He'd overheard it one evening, their voices low and conspiratorial, as they sat in the living room, wine glasses clinking. "Do you think he's really ours?" his mother had mused, a playful lilt in her voice. His father had roared with laughter. "God, wouldn't that be something? Our real son out there making us proud while we're stuck with this one." It had started as a jest, but Evelyn, ever the thorough one, had taken it further. On a whim, she'd tracked down records of other babies born the same day at the same hospital, reading their names aloud to Richard with mock seriousness. "Look at this one, graduated summa cum laude. That could have been ours." They'd howl, oblivious to Leonard standing in the hallway, his fists clenched, his heart a raw, pulsing wound. Their ridicule had followed him into adulthood, amplified by every failed endeavor. His marriage to Madge had been the final proof of his inadequacy. "She fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down," his mother had quipped when he'd brought her home. "Just when you thought your life couldn't get worse, you married her," his father had added, shaking his head. Madge had been a shrew, shrill and demanding, but she was his, a tether to something real. When she left, she took that too, leaving him with nothing but alimony payments and the echoes of his parents' disdain. The bar was his refuge, the whiskey his confessor. Each glass sharpened the memories, turning them into blades that carved deeper with every sip. He didn't ask to be this way, this broken, this lost. He wondered night after night if he'd been different without their voices in his head, without the weight of their disappointment pressing down on him from the moment they decided he was a failure. People envied him for his parents, but he'd have traded them in a heartbeat. He'd have preferred a life in the poorest corner of the city, born to someone, anyone, even a poor black family in the Bronx where expectations were low and love didn't come with a price tag. That night, the thoughts churned darker than usual. The bar's haze thickened, the jukebox's wail grew distant, and the whiskey burned hotter. He drank more than he ever had, chasing oblivion, until the world tilted and blackened. When he came to, he was sprawled on the hardwood floor of the master bedroom in the house where he'd grown up, the house where every insult, every laugh had been etched into his bones. His hands were slick with blood, his clothes soaked in it, the metallic tang thick in the air. He staggered to his feet, his vision swimming, and saw them, the middle-aged couple he rented to,
lying side by side in the bed where his parents had once slept. Their throats were slashed, their faces frozen in terror. A knife jutted from one of their skulls, glinting in the moonlight. He'd come back. In his blackout, in his rage, he'd return to the source of it all. And though they weren't his parents, those ghosts had long since faded, he'd killed them as if they were, spilling their blood to silence the voices that had haunted him for decades. The room spun, the weight of what he'd done crashing down, but beneath the horror, a strange calm settled. The shadows were still there, but for the first time they were quiet.